We've been sold the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
Oh, and our mission rings truer when it is Independence Day weekend, where we help people discover, protect, and share financial independence. It is the Get Ready for the Future show. Welcome in. My name is Scott Inman, and along with me, GenWealth co-founder John Shrewsbury. Settle in for the next half hour. We're going to be answering your financial questions and hopefully giving everyone listening and watching a little bit of guidance, some action steps to help you take another step toward your financial independence. You know, fun fact today is, as we live stream, this is for our live video audience, July 2nd. So we're heading into Independence Day weekend. And our producer Casey tells us it is the midpoint for the entire year. So we have half of 2025 behind us, the other half about to be in front of us. And I do want to kind of talk a little bit about the mid-year outlook that's coming up before too long here. John, LPL Research puts this out every year. They do one in the first part of the year, and then they do one called the mid-year outlook at the midway point. So appropriate that we're at the midway point of the year and talking about this. But you and I are going to be joined by Andrew Beatty, Chief Investment Officer, very soon for an upcoming webinar.
Yeah, our Chief Investment Officer is going to be dissecting all of the tea leaves, if you will, of LPL's research and all the things that they do to help us, help you become financially independent. And we're excited about this because has there ever been more of a tumultuous time? And I think about that on the upside. You know, everybody was expecting with tariffs and Iran war going on and all of that. They expected all kinds of downside risk in the market, and has been nothing but upside. And so is this going to last? Is this a head fake, or what's going on here? We're going to really kind of put Andrew to the test on that, and that is coming up very, very soon.
It's easy to think that we might be getting over our skis a little bit with how fast the market has recovered from all of that tumultuous time, but there is always a tumultuous time ahead. We're just going to talk about the flavor of this tumultuous time, right? It is always there. You know, we're talking about it in our fastest 4 minutes in finance this week about the analogy of the market being an escalator. You can run up and down those steps, but it is always moving up over a long period of time.
Yes, absolutely. And we want to give you good, clear guidance on this because it is when you don't have clarity that you can make some mistakes that can derail your financial independence. I remember back when all this tariff thing came up, I had a call from a client that was like, what are we going to do? I was like, we're just going to hold tight. And are you crazy? No, we're not crazy. We really believe that we need to hold tight, and we did. And he called back and said, hey, that was a great call. And so, you know, obviously we got that right. Who knows? There's not a lot of ways, in my belief, that you can predict what's happening in the market, but you can control your behavior. And that's one of the things that we'll be talking with Andrew about, is how we need to behave in an uncertain market.
Yeah, especially key to your own time horizon and your unique situation as well, which is important as well. So if you want to join us for that webinar, obviously free to attend, you can register by going online to our website, getreadyforthefuture.com. And what you'll need to do then is look under resources and click on live events. There's a few tabs along the top of our homepage. Resources is there, and when you see the pull down that appears under resources, click on live events. It'll take you right there. You can click and register. That's coming up on July 17th, so not very far into the future as we talk about the mid-year outlook here in the middle part of 2025. So let's get started with our questions today. First up, it's Patty from Maumelle. I'm 58 and my husband is 60. We're considering buying long-term care insurance, but the premiums are steep. Is there a point where it no longer makes sense? Patty, thanks for the question. So long-term care insurance, you know, it can feel like a little bit of a gamble depending on what type of insurance you're seeking. So how do you know if the price is worth the peace of mind? Well, first of all, let's define the long-term care insurance. So basically, there are a couple of types, and we'll get into that as we talk about this discussion. But there is John, kind of a sweet spot, and I would say Patty and her husband are in it between 55 and 60. And again, as a general rule, the cost effectiveness of long-term care insurance resides in that age band, right? If you get it a little earlier than 55, then you're going to be statistically paying for it for a fairly long time because you're going to probably be in your 70s, statistically speaking. Some people obviously might have something happening to them earlier, and some people may live a much longer life before needing it. But statistically speaking, you could be paying premiums for 20 plus years, and you could have been better off actually investing those premium dollars and having your own pool of money. But if you wait much longer than 60, it can get cost prohibitive.
It can, and long-term care insurance no longer makes sense to Patty's question when you have plenty of money.
Yeah.
And when I say plenty of money, what I mean is over and above the money that you need to generate the income that you need for retirement. It also makes no sense if you have very little money and you know that it's possibly that you would qualify for state assistance. So there's the two extremes there, but right in the middle is where there is vulnerability. And what I mean by that is that if you have enough money to retire and then have a long-term care event, you could drain away a lot of your retirement resources trying to just particularly pay for your care. And what kind of implication does that have for your spouse who might not be in need of care, but does need income in retirement? So you really can't stretch that dollar to go two places at one time. And so that is why we really do advocate a certain type of long-term care insurance for folks that are in between a Medicaid type situation that the government would pay for it, and you have to be very poor to be able to do that, or someone who is wealthy enough that they've got enough money to generate their income for retirement and also pay $250,000 or $500,000 worth of long-term care expenses.
So let's talk about Patty. She doesn't tell us how much her and her husband have in retirement savings. So the first step for them would obviously be to build a retirement income plan specific to them, because again, just telling us their asset level doesn't necessarily tell us everything that we know. If it's very, very small, we can obviously probably make some predictions there. But if their retirement income plan is built first, you have a plan in place, then you'll know how much of your retirement savings will be required to meet those income needs and desires. If there is additional money, maybe there's a possibility you have your own self-insurance in a pot of money there. But if you do have long-term care insurance, and this is kind of getting into the topic of why it makes sense, you can have a plan in place rather than scrambling to find out how or figure out how you're going to have to pay for a chronic illness if it happens. And the if part of this, John, is a pretty good likelihood. 70% of us will need long-term care according to the most recent data.
Yeah, and I know it's expensive, but it's also expensive to pay for that care. And oftentimes, Scott, we talk about long-term care being taken care of with what is euphemistically called a discounted dollar. And what that means is that you spend some dollars on long-term care insurance to avoid spending hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars on long-term care itself. So the insurance company takes in some of the money, but not all of the money that long-term care would cost you. Now, this is where it begins to get a little bit difficult, because if you have traditional long-term care insurance, you're spending that money and you will never get anything from it if you don't have a long-term care event. That is really why we recommend a very specific type of long-term care coverage, which is a hybrid life and LTC policy.
Yeah, that traditional long-term care policy is very much use it or lose it, as John has described very adequately. And the other piece of that is the premiums are not likely going to remain the same for the duration of the policy. So it can go up, in other words. And if you get that policy, if Patty and her husband were to get those policies at age 58 and 60, there's a great possibility that just at the cusp of needing long-term care, the premiums get so absorbently high that they let the policy lapse and they don't have it when they absolutely need it. So the offset to that, as John has alluded to, is a hybrid policy. And this is basically a life insurance policy with a long-term care rider on it. In other words, you have two ways that you can see money paid out of that policy. If you need long-term care, then you can receive a monthly income drawing off of that death benefit on the life insurance policy for as long as there is money left on that death benefit. So depending on how long it is and how much you're pulling out monthly, it could last for the duration of time that you need the care. The other part of that is it is not a requirement that you end up in a nursing home. This can actually be stay out of the nursing home insurance, as John appropriately calls it often, because you can, if you do not meet 2 of the 6 activities of daily living, things like bathing yourself, feeding yourself, mobility, you qualify for care according to a physician, then you can actually use that money any way you want.
Scott, I think there are a couple of real salient points here. Number one, I think that people tend to have the Superman effect when they think about long-term care. Oh, I'll never need that. Look, health care issues hit all of us at some point in time. And so you've got to be prepared for that one way or the other. And I think that paying for it with discounted dollars makes a lot of sense. The other thing that I think is really interesting is that people look at long-term care almost in the same way that people look at risk. And here's what I mean. You know, we will have people come in from time to time and they go, I just can't lose any money. I have to have it absolutely 100% safe and guaranteed. I get that. But you're going to lose money one way or the other. It's either going to be in the volatility of the market or it's going to be because of inflation. Inflation is very, very under the table, so to speak. It's very insipid. It just insidious, I should say. It is one of those things that creeps up on you and you don't know it, but you are still at risk. In long-term care, you're going to pay for it one way or the other. It is better to think about this and have a plan and have a strategy than to get hit upside the head on it, so to speak, when a family member or you yourself have to come to grips with, I need long-term care, but I don't have a way to pay for it. And we believe that that hybrid policy that you talked about, Scott, is the right way to go.
Yeah, so if you want some more information on how you should approach long-term care insurance or the issue of long-term care itself in retirement, we would suggest that you begin the process of a holistic retirement plan. And that's the GenWealth Ready to Retire process. You can get started by scheduling your first complimentary appointment with a GenWealth financial advisor. Just call toll-free 866-653-PLAN. 866-653-7526, and one of our advisors will be happy to answer any questions you have about long-term care and discuss our retirement planning process. Next up, it's Andrew via email. We're in our early 50s, and my wife is inheriting around $200,000. What's the smartest way to use an inheritance in your prime working years? A midlife windfall can certainly fuel your future here, or it can disappear fast based on the decisions you make. So we're going to talk about how to turn an inheritance into long-term impact. I've said this on the show. We get questions like this very frequently. There is no greater catalyst, no greater opportunity for catalyst for your financial independence than when you get a lump sum, however it is received, at one time. So it is a critical moment. If anybody's listening, in addition to Andrew, that has just come into a little bit of money, no matter how little or how large it is, please listen to this discussion because it has the huge opportunity to be a catalyst to get you closer to financial independence. But there's a priority list that I think we should go through, a checklist, and then there can be a preference after that, right? So let's ask some questions for Andrew, John.
So, first question, Andrew, do you have an emergency fund? If you have an emergency fund, we'll check the box. If you don't, then you need to dedicate somewhere in the neighborhood of a minimum of 3 months of your living expenses into that emergency fund out of that $200,000. Now, if you have some emergency fund, but you don't have enough, then go ahead and fully fund it from that $200,000. Do you have any debt other than your mortgage? Probably want to get rid of that because you're paying somebody else's financial independence as opposed to yours by paying interest on that debt. Do you have a need to boost your retirement savings? The only way you're really going to know that is to have a clear understanding about where you are right now. Where you are right now, you can sit down with a financial advisor and calculate the numbers and see, am I on track with the money that I'm contributing, the company match, all of that type of thing? Am I on track for my desired and required retirement income amount. If you're not on track, then that's a great way to apply whatever's left over from that $200,000 after you take care of debt and take care of the emergency fund. Those first two questions, the emergency fund and debt, pretty easy, pretty easy to come through with. But the issue of retirement, if you are, these folks are between 10 and 15 years away from their typical retirement age. So there's a lot of momentum that they still have available to them through investing, Scott.
Yeah.
But planning is really critical at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. You are still entering very close to the retirement red zone when you need to be careful about your investment strategy, and you need to have a clearer idea of what your retirement is going to look like, including the monetary side of that. How much income are you going to need in retirement, and how much additional discretionary monthly income do you want in retirement? Because objectively, if you take a look at that $200,000, let's say we have checked those first two boxes. You're good on your emergency fund. You have no consumer debt. You have low or no debt other than your mortgage. $200,000 invested at a hypothetical 8% rate of return over 10 years would grow to over $430,000. Think about that. That's doubling, more than doubling that inheritance in a 10-year time frame. Over 15 years, if you're going to work a little longer, your $200,000 could grow to more than $630,000. So clearly, the power of compound interest can significantly move the needle for your financial independence if you have the opportunity to put all $200,000 to work into your retirement savings. Now, it doesn't have to go into a retirement account, right? Because you can't put that all in at once into an IRA or certainly into your employer-sponsored plan either. So it would need to be in a non-retirement account or things like an annuity that could be tax-deferred for growth for that long period of time. But the investment selection is not really as important in this discussion as the possibility of growth. So I think if you just let those numbers resonate, you know it could make a huge difference. But I think, again, coming back to the specific planning, John, is key here because it really allows you to even play with it a little bit and do some variables.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the quick questions that people would ask, well, what about the mortgage? I want to pay that mortgage off. I want to be house debt free. And I get that. I understand that. But in this financial order of operation that we've kind of been through here, we would say that the mortgage is actually fourth, because the mortgage is, in most cases these days, you're probably paying a fairly low interest rate because interest rates were on the deck a few years ago. People refinanced like crazy and got those interest rates locked in. And so people are really pretty well in good shape with that. The mortgage payoff, a lot of people you have to think about it like this. If you take that asset, that $200,000, and dump it in your mortgage, that becomes an illiquid asset. Your house is relatively illiquid. You got to have a place to live. So, you know, that's tied up in the equity of your home. But if you have that money working for you in your retirement program, that should really be the priority because there are no do-overs in retirement. You got one shot at it. You can pay for a mortgage payment out of your retirement account if you need to, but it's something that I think does, as Scott said, really dictate planning as the first step and sitting down and going through this order of operation with a financial advisor to be sure that you are on track with your emergency fund, that you're on track with your debt retirement program, that you're on track with your living retirement program, the income that you're going to need to live on in retirement. And then if you have money left over or don't need it in your retirement program, then we would address the mortgage at that time.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, too, that it doesn't have to be either or. I mean, we have a couple of advisors just last year paid off their mortgages, right? But they're also on track for their retirement goals, right?
That's right.
So as long as that's happening at the same time in parallel to one another, you could potentially do this, but if you can't, and most people really can't, most people are going to have to get on track for retirement and then have some plan to maybe accelerate the payment of their mortgage. And I do think if you need a goal there, having it done at retirement, having you arrive at the destination of retirement at the same time you're mortgage free is a great way to look at that. And again, can be mapped out for you in the Ready to Retire process from GenWealth. So if you want to give us a call and walk through that process, or anybody else trying to work through the decisions of, hey, got a little windfall here, whether it's a lump sum from some payout from severance because you're changing jobs, or if it's an inheritance, whatever it looks like. Don't just make a whimsical decision with it. And we didn't even talk about some fun right here. Like after you've done the planning, there might actually be some money to carve out and have a little fun with it too.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So it's not all about just making sure you don't put your hands on it. I'd like to say keep your grubby little hands off of it and make sure it's working for you. That's the way I look at it in my own life. Make sure you're on track, and you can't know that unless you've gone through the planning process. And we'd be happy to help. 866-653-PLAN. It's 866-653-7526. Andrew, your question is the question of the week. We're going to send you a Get Ready for the Future Show tumbler for being named the question of the week. We'd like you to email us to claim it. Just send that email to show@getreadyforthefuture.com. Next, it's Robin from Haskell. I'm 45 and just now getting serious about saving. I've only got about $80,000 in my 401k. Is it too late to catch up and still retire in my 60s? Late start, don't panic here. Here's how to go from behind to being on track, even if you didn't start saving early. And we do have a lot of people that come into the GenWealth offices in Robin's boat, right? They're in their mid-40s. It has not been a priority for them and maybe a spouse. They've been focused on raising the kids and giving them what they think they need and maybe even want, and they have delayed taking care of their true financial independence. But here's the deal. The key is always time. Whether you're 25, 35, 45, Robin, at 45 and you want to retire in your 60s, I see that as the optimistic side of this equation. The $80,000 is not. But if you have a couple of decades, there's reason to be optimistic.
Yeah, I've run some numbers, Scott. Let me refer to them here. Compound interest calculators do wonders in situations like this.
You didn't just think of this off the top of your head.
No, I don't have that compound interest calculator going in my brain, unfortunately. So, but your $80,000 would grow to about $320,000 by age 65 if you're able to get an 8% rate of return. That's just your $80,000. Now, if you can do as well as the historical average of the S&P 500, then you might be able to get that to over $530,000. That's a simple compound interest calculator. This is simply a matter of being sure that you're managing your 401k money as effectively as possible. Now, let's talk about what else you can do. Max out your 401k and get the company match. Here's an example. If you have a $50,000 salary, Robin, and you make a 15% contribution to your 401k and you average 8% rate of return on that, and you get a 50% match up to 6% of salary, which is fairly typical of most 401k plans, your account balance at age 65 will be around $800,000. Now, that doesn't count any catch-up contribution, which you will be eligible for as of age 50. If you think about a Roth 401k option, you might have, if you have one. If not, your income allows you to do so, you can make an outside contribution to a Roth IRA in addition to your 401k. I think what you've got to do is you've got to think about your priorities when considering how to fund these increases in savings, Scott, because we all have discretionary spending that if we just think about it and redirect it, and we're really going to get serious, as Robin says, about saving, then you've got to make some serious decisions.
That's what I was going to say, John. I do think at some point in this process for Robin, she has to take a hard look at why she is behind. What has caused her to not be able to get the savings in, because we've said this on the show multiple times too. John worked through those rates of return, and you got to have that. But more important than the rate of return is your contribution rate. Getting the money in there so that those dollars can go to work for you is the most important thing. So if you have $80,000 at 45 years old, there's got to be a reason you didn't put more dollars in there. So is it debt? Are you being crippled by debt? Do you need to work through a debt snowball plan and get out of debt? Is it your income? Do you need to work at 45 at raising your income, lifting your lid and being able to get a new job, a new career going, or an advancement in your current career so that you can widen the gap between your expenses and your income and have margin so that you can contribute? Is it the kids? I mean, I think it's worth a hard look at how much are we spending on our children and what ages are they? Because when they do get off to college and get through the back end of that, And just like a couple of mine, they get married and you give them off to somebody else for their financial responsibility. That does open up. I mean, quite frankly, from a financial sense, you're not trying to wish your kids away, but the reality is you're going to have more available discretionary income to or money to be able to put back into retirement. And then budgeting. If you haven't done any budgeting and that's caused you to just throw money at whatever you feel like throwing at, it's time to take a hard look there too, because as John said, when you crunch the numbers, we all have more income or more margin than I think we have.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and oftentimes, if you are at this point in time in your life, maybe your kids are gone from home, and maybe you could downsize your home, reduce your monthly payment, and there is the money. In this example that we talked about, you'd have to save about $625 a month out of your pocket to be able to make that happen. Well, that's about $156 a week. I know that's a chunk of money, but again, it is about your financial independence. Getting to $800,000 with your retirement, that plus some Social Security, you could have a decent retirement in Arkansas. That would not be too bad of a situation at all. So I think that clearly you've got to be thinking about what your objective is and be very intentional about working toward that objective.
Yeah, I think finding out that retirement contribution is all going to be handed to you through the GenWealth Ready to Retire process. I know I've talked it up in this show, but it is the truth. All of these questions that we get need answers, and it is about building that plan. That's where you find the answers. I've only got $80,000. What do I need to grow it to? Well, that depends on when you retire and how much income you need. And then once you know how much I need when I finally arrive at retirement, we'll be able to tell you how much you need to contribute to reach that goal.
Scott, one other thing on this subject, most people that have money in their 401k think, well, that's in my 401k. My financial advisor wouldn't have anything to do with that. That's not true. We can help you with your 401k. We can give you strategies inside your 401k account to help you build that financial independence more assuredly and quickly, and make the right moves with your 401k instead of just throwing money at it and hoping it works out.
Hey, we want to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel for exclusive content you can't find anywhere else to help you discover, protect, and share true financial independence. Just search for GenWealth Financial Advisors on YouTube. Time for our final question on this week's show. Anna Lee from Little Rock writes, my spouse is retired and I'm still working. We're not sure how to coordinate withdrawals, Social Security, and taxes. Where do we even begin? That's a great question, and it just proves how complex the retirement process is. When one spouse is working and one's retired, the financial puzzle can get tricky. So we're going to talk about how to keep it from costing you. The real value of retirement income planning shows up here, John, because I think most people probably retire at the same time. I think that's probably the goal, but there are a lot of circumstances, age differences. One spouse may really hate his job and the other spouse may really love hers, right? So there's all kinds of reasons that we see one step into retirement and one keep working. And I think this is where the planning process can really shine.
Yeah, let's talk about in broad terms, since we don't have a lot of specifics here, Scott. I think the number one thing that you've got to do is you've got to watch the tax brackets. The working spouse's income combined with IRA withdrawals and a portion of Social Security can push you into a higher tax bracket. That's one thing. You want to avoid unnecessary IRA withdrawals as well, and only take the required minimums if applicable or needed income. I would also consider using taxable accounts to control your taxable income, meaning that if you are taking money from a taxable account, you're going to pay at a capital gain tax rate as opposed to an ordinary income tax rate. I think you also have to be kind of mindful of a couple of things. Social Security taxation is not the same as ordinary income taxation. Social Security, about 15% of Social Security is tax-free for most people. As much as 50% can be if you're in the lower income bracket. But all of these things are very complex. A lot of moving parts here, a lot of uncertainty here. And that's where clarity is at a premium. And clarity comes from sitting down with an advisor that has been there and done that with retirement income planning. Scott, I venture to say that we spend thousands of dollars at GenWealth each year just to maintain just the software that we have to figure things out like this. And that's the real value of coming to a financial advisor, because they not only have the intellectual expertise, they also have the equipment, if you will, to be able to sort through this in a very personal way for each client.
Yeah, I think one of the things that first comes to mind when we deal with people where you're going to have one spouse retire before the other is the question that needs to be asked is, do you have to make withdrawals from your IRA or from any taxable accounts while one spouse is still working? We often see that one spouse, they've been saving a significant, if not all of their income and trying to live off of the other spouse's income. Can that continue? Because the longer you delay the withdrawals from those retirement accounts, obviously the more growth you can potentially have. But and then speaking of the growth topic there, I think it's very important to not only work through the coordination of withdrawals, a Social Security strategy, worrying about taxes and making sure you minimize that. The other piece to this is investment strategy. Anna Lee didn't mention that, but we referenced earlier in the show the Retirement Red Zone, John, and I think it's worth talking a little bit about that in general as we have just a couple of minutes left, that the investment strategy, especially if she has a spouse already retired, needs some addressing.
Yeah, it does. And our flooring and bucketing strategy that we use in the Ready to Retire process is tailor-made for folks that do this. And what we can do is to model your situation. What does that mean? It means that we can say, okay, how long are you going to be working, and how long before you actually retire as opposed to your spouse, and then model all of that out and handle all of the vagaries of this complex cash flow thing and help you to understand kind of where that could potentially put you. The other thing that I would think is worth mentioning, Scott, is as I used to say, I've said on the show many times, I used to have an aunt named Irma. And Irma is now a government rule or government program.
Bad word.
And is a bad word, and you don't want Irma to show up in your retirement. Irma is a premium increase in your Medicare Part B and D if you make too much money. And so we don't know the numbers here, but if you are on Medicare and your total joint adjusted gross income goes above a certain level, then you could be paying more money for your Medicare premium, and it's not cheap at all.
Yeah.
And so those are things that I think that you've got to sit down, work through with a financial advisor. Yes, it is complex, but the financial advisor's job is to simplify the complexity and then put it in a level that you can understand and help you to work through and make some very conscious decisions about when you should retire, when your spouse should retire, and what order you should be taking income in.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. All of those things from a taxation standpoint matter, and it matters for the withdrawals. We talked about the front end strategy of maybe deferring withdrawals until the other spouse retires, but you have to watch out for things like when you get to RMD age and you haven't taken any withdrawals, your RMD might be a significant number, and the withdrawals that the government requires you to make could send you into another tax bracket and also make you pay Aunt Irma. Time for the final thoughts, John.
Real quickly, Scott, as I listen to our questions and what have you, I think about the condition of people's psychology when they come in to see us. And before they've ever come in, they're struggling with a lot. They're struggling with complexity. They're struggling with fear. They're struggling with uncertainty about how their income is going to sustain them in retirement, whether markets are going to crater their retirement and all that type of thing. So there's a lot stacked up when people walk through the door at GenWealth. Now, on the other side of the planning process, which you could say probably takes off and on a couple of weeks for us to get through, maybe 3 weeks for us to get through in looking at everything and sitting down with you a couple of times and all of that. On the other side of that is really clarity and certainty and a plan and really confidence in the future. And I think that's really what most people really desire in retirement, is to have a confident future. And you don't get that by just listening to the news and trying to sort your way through all of the uncertainty and all of the questions and everything. You get it by finding clarity, and that's found in the GenWealth Ready to Retire process here at GenWealth Financial Advisors.
I'll do a quick final thought. Reach out to us to walk through that process. 866-653-PLAN. It's 866-653-7526. And that's all the time we have for this week's Get Ready for the Future show. As always, thanks to the folks that send in questions. We want to hear from you. You can text to 501-381-5228, or you can leave a voicemail. You can call that number, 501-381-5228. See you next time.
The GenWealth Financial Team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.